Well, maybe we'll go live. It's spinning. There we go. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the F6P NFL DFS Kickoff Show. I don't know how long we were live. We were spinning. It didn't show it was recording, but now it says it's been on for like 18 seconds. So you may have heard me jibber jabbering, Joe laughing. But we're here to talk DFS. I think we can officially say, Joe, that not that it's a competition, but if it is between like Dynasty, redraft, DFS, we automatically win because we're still talking fantasy football, and we will be for another 4 weeks. And everybody else, they're packing up their stuff. They're not doing work. And here we are grinding it out, trying to win some more money. Because I'm hot
to the very end,
man. One of my best runs ever in DFS. I want to keep this up. I do not want this DFS season to end, but welcome again to the NFL DFS Kickoff Show. I am Keith Flemming. That's right, to the bitter end. Joined as always by my brother in arms, Joe Matz. Joe the Brain Matz. Sorry, Joe. Not giving you your kudos. We normally, if you listen to the show, give our favorite play 6,900 and below. We do a median and a value for DraftKings. I mean, what's the fun of that? There's only 8 teams playing this weekend. We kicked around a bunch of different ideas, but we settled on just doing our top 5 plays at the 4 positions. Sorry, defenses. We appreciate you, Jamie. That we're going to, like I said, give our top 5, and we're including price. So, obviously it would not be that difficult to go CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Cooper Kupp,
play all the best
top
guys.
5 wide receivers. But when you account price, and me and Joe talked about it, we just kind of want to talk about the guys that we're circling or looking at real quickly before we get straight. Right. Because, unfortunately, we still have a salary that we have to get within.
Alas.
I think it's very important in these smaller slates, right, to attack the right games. There's 3 in particular, in my opinion, that a majority of your play should come from this weekend. And there's 2-3 that I would stay away from, minus, again, like the defenses, running backs, like some of these bad weather games, you can get advantage in that. But don't outsmart yourself. Like, I think with these smaller slates, people get so obsessed with, ownership projection and trying to don't get cute. Like, just try to put the best lineup possible. And what I've had a lot of success in the last month on is doing whatever your amount that you're going to spend for that week. Let's say it's just $50, make it a round number. Do just a $50 single entry. Do one. And do the smallest number of participants as possible. If it's 277, if it's 400, whatever, rather than doing like $3 $12 and a $10, I just think you have a better chance. And also in these smaller fields, i.e. last weekend, I did 2 $200 single entries, scored 185 and 186 points. Basically, it was the same lineup. And because it was a 277 entry, I finished 3rd in that one. And then 41st in the one that was 799. And I actually did look. The next biggest one was 1,400. I would have finished, I think, about 180th or 70th or whatever. I would have doubled my money. I would have won $400, but it would have been less than what I won, which was $3K in the one for 3rd and $600 in the one that I finished 41st, because there's not as many entries and you don't have to beat as many lineups and as many people. And I think especially in these small slates, that is the way to go, because if you get, 3-4 plays right, like really right, where there's, say, 3-4 guys that they do much better than anybody else. I think of the Saturday night slate last weekend, where if you had, like I did, Nico Collins, Jonathan Taylor, Najee Harris, and CJ Stroud, you were cashing. I cashed, and I started Robert Woods like a dumbass. He didn't even play. And I still cashed because I had those 4 guys. So don't you think, just don't overthink it and really pay attention to what games you think there's going to be a lot of scoring in. And obviously those are the guys you need to attack, especially in the cheaper range.
Yeah. I think we lost Keith there for a sec, but he's 100% correct, where some of these games, defenses are going to have advantages going into it. Very much pay attention to weather. Obviously, certain teams like Dallas, we don't have to worry about it, which is fantastic because that is one of the games you should be looking at where there aren't a lot of weak defenses when you get to the playoffs, and there's even fewer weak offenses. But Green Bay is one of those defenses that, for me, as we'll get to as we go here, you 100% want to target. So, yeah, it's very much, like you said, we want to key in on the games where we think there's going to be a lot of points. So find those rare weak defenses that made the playoffs. Find those games where weather is not going to be a major factor. There are a number of games this week where the weather could play a major factor, where we've got one game where it's going to be winds in the mid to high 20 mile per hours. We've got chances of snow in both Buffalo and Kansas City. So, yeah, you really have to pay attention to everything. But, yeah, I think you could very easily just pick probably one or two games this weekend that I really like for the offenses and put as many of those players in as you possibly can.
Yeah, I'm going to have, and we'll talk about it, but there's probably going to be 4 to 6 guys from the Detroit Rams game and the Cowboys Packers. Like, I just think those are the two games that if I had to guess that, the most points are going to be scored. Again, you can get creative, but you could tell me that the Houston-Cleveland game could turn a shootout. It could, but I just think it's most likely that those are going to be the two games. All right, let's start with the QB position. Right. I am pretty confident that the KC-Miami game is not going to be with the weather. It being on Peacock, that should automatically mean that, it's going to be tougher to score for both teams. And I would be shocked if they end up scoring a bunch of points, especially with the pass catchers and receivers. The QBs, let's start there. Yeah. Who is your, number one? Let's go ahead and do it. Let's just do it that way. Who is your guy? Who do you think is the guy that right now at his price is the best play? Because I think me and you are going to basically agree on this. For me, there's, basically two guys that I think are 1A, 1B.
For me, it's Jared Goff at 6,200. I just look at him. Again, we've talked all season.
Joe.
Oh, did you lose me? We good?
Uh-oh. Yeah, it's just a little lag, but I hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, for me, it's Goff. We've talked all season about, Jared Goff. We like him in domes. We especially like him at home. And, I talked about briefly earlier, there's not a lot of, bad defenses that make the playoffs. Now, there's more bad defenses than bad offenses because as much as the defense wins championships crew wants to go on and on about it, the best offenses make the playoffs. Like by DVOA, the top 10 offenses all made the playoffs. So offense tends to matter more, but you don't have a lot of bad defenses. The Rams, the Lions, I guess you can make the argument too, but the Rams are definitely one of the lesser defenses that have made it to the postseason. Passing DVOA defensively, the Rams are 21st. There are only three teams that made the playoffs that are worse. So this is a bottom tier defense for the playoffs. As much as I know in my own head when this matchup got announced, I was like, oh, it's Stafford versus the Lions. It's also Goff versus the Rams, and he has the real revenge game because, Detroit traded Stafford to a better situation. The Rams were ditching Jared Goff. Now he gets to have the home playoff game. Big chance for him. Again, weaker defense. And he's also cheaper than Stafford. I could go either way on who wins this game. So the fact that Goff is $300 cheaper makes him the play for me over Matthew Stafford. And then I don't know if we've lost Keith here. I guess to jump ahead, I do think, the injuries, the comment we got there from Jamie. Denzel Ward being out would be helpful for Stroud and Nico, but in general, that game scares me because Cleveland is right there with Baltimore. Those have been the two best defenses pretty easily this entire season. That is a game where, clear weather, there's a chance, but it's hard for me to want to play Stroud against that defense when, I mean, again, that's the toughest defense anyone is playing this week because San Francisco and Baltimore have buys. So even with the injuries, I still can't buy into that one at the price because, again, Stroud, I'm having to pay for more than I do Stafford and Goff, who have much easier matchups. For that matter, I might like Flacco more than Stroud just because, again, he doesn't have to play his own defense and he's $700 cheaper. But, yeah, glad to have you back, Keith. I like it. I just finished off saying Goff is my number one, in large part because I think, like you said, I think that those two games where I think there's going to be a lot of points. And he is the second cheapest of the four guys in those games. And, I mean, the Rams defense is just not on the level of the Cowboys defense. So even though Jordan Love is more expensive. I was thinking he was less. So, yeah, Jared Goff to me is in one of the high scoring matchups. He's at home. He is the guy who's in the true revenge game. And I absolutely love Amon-Ra St. Brown as well. So give me Goff.
All right. Sorry, I don't know what is going on with my internet connection, but it is acting
technical difficulties.
Wild. So honestly, to be straight up, I didn't hear a lot of that, but I did catch that Goff is your number one guy.
That's the important takeaway.
Goff was my number one. Top five, but for me, it's Flacco or it's Stafford. I wish, for me, the biggest concern with Goff is the fact that it looks like he's going to be missing two of his best weapons.
Oh, sure. No Hawkinson, especially.
And you mean Laporta, right?
Oh, sorry. Laporta. God, mixing up my
we're going back
north tight ends.
But I mean, I do. I like Goff. I love St. Brown. We'll get into that with the receivers. It's just, Flacco, obviously the scary part is he's Joe Flacco. I mean, it just is.
Yes.
Like, I know we have this love fest with Flacco, and rightfully so. He's been incredible. But it's Joe Flacco. Like, if you really think about this game, it's C.J. Stroud versus Joe Flacco, and everybody's on the Browns and Joe Flacco, which scares me. But if you look at what he's done this year, I mean, like, no matter how you look at it, oh, my God. Like, volume is king. What's up, Dave Eddy? The dude's throwing it over 40 times a game, 42-plus pass attempts in 4 or 5, over 40 attempts per game overall. He scored at least 17 points in all 5 of his starts, more than almost 23 basically in his last 4, averaging 25, 300-plus in 4 or 5. Again, averaging almost 325, at least 2 touchdowns in every game, 11 touchdowns his last 4, and we've already seen him torch this Texans defense in Houston just a few weeks ago. 368, 3 touchdowns, 29 points. And again, then I go to Stafford. The reason Stafford keeps being the guy is because I originally had Flacco. And I think, though, if I have to rank them 1 through 5, I'd have Stafford 1 because it's narrative. I'm serious. Like, I know that seems crazy, but Stafford is going to feel so comfortable coming back to Detroit. And if you don't think that there's a part of him that doesn't want to just ball out in front of that, fan base, an organization that honestly wasted a large majority of the prime of his career not being able to put talented weapons around him. And he's just in a perfect situation because the Lions secondary is freaking awful. And I don't think enough's being made. Like, if Baker was healthy, I would make an argument that he has the best matchup of any QB. But I don't think you could say it's not Stafford when all of his guys are healthy. We've seen what this Rams offense has been when they have Kyron Williams, Cooper Kupp, and Puka. Totally different offense. And when I say this Lions D, the last 3 games, they've given up almost 1,200 passing yards. They're at 384 per. 6 passing touchdowns. QBs have scored at least 23.5 points on DK versus them. Opposing QBs, at minimum, have thrown for 345 and 2 touchdowns the last 3 weeks. And oh, by the way, 2 of the 3 games, Nick Mullins started. So it's not like it's a murderer's row of QBs dicing up this Detroit secondary. And so Stafford's playing great. He scored 17.6 points or more 6 straight, averaging almost 22 points a game, which at his price, $6,500, 22 points. Like, if we're saying that's his floor, That's perfect. We're over the 3 times number. We're getting almost in the 4 times. He's got 15 passing touchdowns in his last 6 games. Big thing. Throwing it a lot, even with Kyron Williams, 31 plus pass attempts, 7 straight. And again, the Lions 30th on DK versus QBs. And I love Kupp. I love DeMarcus Robinson. I actually don't love Puka. It scares me a little bit with Kupp playing and his price. I mean, if you like him, I can't go against any Rams receiver. And then on top of all that, the Detroit is a really good run defense. So as great as Kyron Williams has been, I don't see the Rams going in and being able to just run it on this Detroit Lions team. I do think Stafford's the safest play. So I have him 1. I would have Flacco 2. I do have Goff in my order. He would be a little bit lower down. What's another guy that you got in other than, because I'm pretty sure Flacco and Stafford are in your top 5, right?
Yeah, that's 2 and 3 for me. Okay, I mean, the big difference for me is with the Goff Stafford one, it's the $300. If they were even,
very fair.
I would take Stafford. Again, I think those are 2 of the weaker defenses. You're playing in a dome. You're going to feel good about both of those guys.
Goff is a safer double stack, too, because as we'll get into with the tight ends, I love Brock Wright. Love Brock Wright. And you could go Brock Wright, St. Brown, Goff, and really get creative with the rest of your lineup. So I do understand that. Who is the next guy on your list?
So number 4 for me, and this is the one expensive guy that I'm kind of like, I don't know if I care. I'll just spend that money. That's Dak Prescott at 7,600. Again, I think these are the 2 games that I really want to target. Weather, not going to be an issue. We're indoors. And like I said, you want to find the bad defenses. 26th in passing DVOA, the Green Bay defense.
Ooh.
The only team in the playoffs that is worse is probably unsurprising based on their last 6 weeks. Is the Philadelphia Eagles. And yeah, like you said, Baker Mayfield would have an argument to be number 1 on the list, but
I'm terrified, right? I'm
super
so
banged up. He's so banged up that it's just, and that is the Monday night game,
Mike
right?
Evans
so
could have, and think about the game Mike Evans could have versus the secondary. But again, Baker last week couldn't throw on Carolina, couldn't move. I mean, is what scares me. It's a lower body injury, which that means he's going to have difficult throwing it down the field, which that's not good for Evans. The Cowboys thing too, I just want to point this out because this is why I think you're onto something. And I asked you this question last night: is do you just stack Dak and Lamb and say, I'm going to figure it out the rest of the way? Cowboys have played 12 games since week 6. 6 home games, 6 away games. Away games, they're averaging 24 points per game. Home games, 38.5 points. They've scored 35 or more points in 4 of their last 6 games at home, 30 plus in 5 of 6. They are a juggernaut in that Dallas, Jerry world.
Yeah.
And I do. I think maybe we're sleeping on Dak. Maybe he should be number 1 because I really like Brandon Cooks. I'll get into that in the receivers. But he's the safest. Don't you think he has the highest ceiling? Or do you think maybe one of those guys, if they get down, potentially eclipse him?
I think he's right there. I think, you could make the argument that someone else is there with him because of that scenario. But it's like you said, when you look at all those home splits with Dallas, it's like those games weren't close. I think they played, that Lions game, I believe, was the only close game all season that they played at home.
Oh, I think when the Seattle game, was that a home or was that a road one? I keep getting it mixed up. I think that was a home game. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I mean, they scored.
But yeah, the vast majority of their home games have not been particularly close. And, it hasn't mattered a lot. Again, they beat the Rams by 23. Dak gave us 32 points.
Don't you think if you're the Cowboys too, you want this is a team that's got a very fragile playoff ego. They need it. You know what I'm saying?
That's true. Build up your confidence.
Yes. Beat them down.
I watched him throw for 400 yards against the Giants in the game. They won by 32 points.
There you go.
Yeah, Dak's ceiling is as high as anyone. His floor is as high as anyone. There's an argument just outside of fantasy that Dak should be like second team All Pro this season. This is his best season overall. I don't think it's even much of an argument. And yeah, Joe Barry's defense, as someone who lives with a Packers fan, my buddy's always telling me constantly, like, when are we going to fire Joe Barry? This is horrendous. I mean, the last 2 weeks, they didn't give up a lot. Now, that was against the Bears, who only threw 16 passes in that game, and then Nick Mullins. But then you go the previous 6 weeks, they gave up 12 touchdowns, only had 1 interception in that time period, 3 300-yard games. The only team they held under 200 yards passing was the New York Giants, and that was Tommy DeVito's most efficient game because he threw 158 in a score on 21 attempts and ran for 70 on the ground. So, this defense has not stopped anyone who's been showing competent offense. I mean, the Panthers threw for 300 yards in Week 16 against them. So, there's just – I would love for Green Bay to win this game, and I hope they do, but I don't see it happening unless, they score 35 because I don't see this defense holding Dallas under 30, and this Dallas team is powered through the air, I don't know that losing Zeke was necessarily the problem in this run game, but it's clear this run game is not what we're accustomed to. And it usually hasn't mattered because Dak and CD have just torn through whatever's in their path the vast majority of the time. Now, obviously, they've had letdowns against good teams, and Green Bay's a reasonably good team, but it's a good team on offense. It's not a good team on defense. So, yeah, I think you can fire up Dak, especially, if you're in, I guess in this slate, doesn't matter if you're in a tournament or you're, playing against 10 buddies. I think Dak is a good play regardless. So to me, that top 4 is locked in as the top 4. Completely and then it becomes
that's what I was about to ask you. Who is your 5th? Who do you?
Where am I taking that risk? I'm going Jordan Love. I know this Dallas defense is good. I'm, a little worried about it for sure. But again, I think if there's someone who is guaranteed to be in a game where he has to put up a ton of points to stay in it, it's Jordan Love. Because, even if Baker Mayfield is relatively healthy, there's always a chance that's just kind of a low-scoring game anyway. The weather's not supposed to be great there. The Philly offense has not been awesome as of late either, and they're super banged up. So I don't know if there's another game where you're guaranteeing that outside of, maybe Pittsburgh, but I don't want to bet on Mason Rudolph in bad weather against a good defense. So, yeah, I got Jordan Love. He's indoors. He's been playing super well. If Christian Watson is a go, then that's all the more reason to like him. And even if he's not, he's built up chemistry with.
They keep finding these receivers from freaking everywhere.
4 different guys he can throw to get 2 scores and 100 yards. So, yeah, again, I don't know that he's going to end up in any of my lineups because I think that top 4 is kind of on a level above everyone else. But if I'm going 5, considering the Baker injury kind of knocks him out of it for me, it's going to be Jordan Love.
So I completely agree about the 4. So much so that my 5th, I'm going to just say it's not a cash game play. This is if you want to not listen to what I tell people all the time to do cash games, single entries, double ups, and you got to do the multi-entry. CJ Stroud's the dude. I think the Browns are going to win. I think they're going to be up. He's indoors. He's that dude. It's what I said last week in the game versus the Colts. The difference was last week the Colts couldn't score. I think the Browns are going to score. And if you're getting CJ Stroud, I don't really care. He's proven it doesn't really matter who his wide receivers are. He's just that guy. So if I had to take it's basically the same thing you're saying with Jordan Love, which if I was just ranking for cash, it would be Love. It's the other guy in that top 5. But if I'm thinking just outside the box and a guy that it would not shock me at all if we look up and we go, man, CJ Stroud had 35 points and they lose because that could very easily happen. I think that, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Go. All I was just going to say, just, to add to, I think just that game in general where, defensively, obviously Cleveland's very good defensively across the board. But another reason I think to like Flacco is that Houston is a really good run defense and not a really good pass defense.
Completely agree. And they're awful versus tight ends, which, hello, David Njoku. We'll get into him.
Yes, 100%.
I think the QB is probably the easiest position, honestly, like of the four, because we're going to get into running back in just a second. It's a mess. Actually, because of that, let's actually go. Because I want to do the easy. Let's get the easy ones out first. All right, tight end. Let's go that way. The next.
Okay, I like it.
It's got to be Njoku 1.
100%.
Like, I think Njoku may be the number one play all this week at his price. He's 5,600. And if you look at his games with Joe Flacco, which that's what we should do at this point, he's played 4 of them, 28 receptions, at least 6 in each, 39 targets, at least 8 in each. You're getting a guy that's getting 8 targets at 5,600, 373 yards. So that's basically 93.25 per game. 4 touchdowns. And this is the thing I love on DK. He's averaging almost 24 points per game. And the least he's had 16.1, which, by the way, that's against the Texans. But that's an anomaly. The great thing about this and why I love this, like I would love Njoku just for what I told you. The Texans are awful. If you've listened to this show all year, you know we pick any tight end that plays the Texans. They're going to be on one of our lists because over 9 targets per, over 6 receptions per. And again, Njoku had probably his worst possible game with the way he's been involved in this Browns offense he could have. And I also like the fact that the Texans actually have a legit shutdown corner, which I don't think Amari Cooper is going to just go bananas like he did, I believe, in the last game. But I think at 5,600, he either needs to be your tight end or he needs to be your flex. Like I've done 6 lineups so far. He's in every lineup I've done.
Yeah, again, he was the guy, again, that I was talking about before the Flacco takeover. I was like, David Njoku is this incredibly kind of under the radar because before Flacco, that offense was not doing well.
Jamie, since Flacco, Njoku has been the number 2 tight end overall in fantasy.
Yeah. Because prior to Flacco, he had that streak where he had, 6 straight games in double-digit points. And then he had the one-off game with the Rams, and then Flacco comes in.
It's like,
and 3 out of 4 games, it's 20 points. The off game is a 6 reception, 44 yards, and a touchdown, which we'll take every single time from a tight end. So, yeah, the fact that
number
you're
one
getting
receiver, basically, right, at 5,800 or 5,600.
Literally, no. Again, the number 2 tight end over the last month. I don't know. There's not a better tight end in this field playing right now. Like, obviously, Travis Kelce is a better player if he's fully healthy, all that. He hasn't looked fully healthy in a while, and it's bad weather. And again, yeah, it's the Houston defense that we like to pick on when they go up against tight ends. So, yeah, I don't know that there will be, to your point about him maybe being the best play overall. I don't know that there's going to be a lineup I do that I don't have him in.
And again, in these, especially if you're listening to me, which please do the single entries, do the double ups, especially if they're smaller single entries, not getting to like these 20,000 person ones. It's okay if he's 50% on. That's all right. Like, just let's trust that I'm going to beat these people with my other 8 plays, but don't fumble a gimme when it is a gimme. You know what I'm saying? Like, to me, just don't fear that. All right, let me go ahead and do my stick for number 2. I think it's number 2 with the bullet, and I know some people are going to be like, God, he's smoking again.
I love it.
I think there's zero chance that Sam Laporta plays. I think it would be insane for the Lions. It would be
shocking based on what we've heard so far.
From what we've heard, the fact that this guy looks like a generational tight end, like why? Because everything I've read is with the kind of hyperextension he had, you can absolutely do much more damage to it. It is very plausible that if something, he tweaks it again or whatever, he could end up tearing, something. And then now you've not only messed up this year. Give him the week off. Maybe you pull the upset. Maybe he's ready next week. Maybe he's not. But I just think he's too big of a piece. Having said that, Brock Wright at 3K, if Laporta's out, he will be in all my lineups. And this is why, okay? Because I want people to not think I'm freaking crazy. Laporta, obviously, we know, huge part of the Lions offense. 120 targets, 86 receptions, almost 900 yards, 10 touchdowns. But looking back at last year, we should not be that shocked at what Laporta did. I'm actually mad at myself that I missed this preseason. So they got the 11 touchdowns to tight ends this year because you got Laporta's 10, the one from Brock Wright. They threw 13 last year to tight ends. Hawkinson only played 4 games and caught 3 touchdowns, and they had 10 more touchdowns to tight ends. It's crazy. So if you add it up, that's 13 last year plus 11. That's 24. In the last 2 years in this offense, Jared Goff has thrown 59 touchdown passes. 24 of them have gone to tight ends. That's a 40% clip. Plus, this is not a good defense versus tight ends. We've been, again, another one that we picked on all year. The Rams cannot cover tight ends. Right at 3K, he scores a touchdown, which I actually think there's a good chance if Laporta's out, Raymond's out. He's already basically made what we need from that touchdown. That's a minimum of 7 points, right? Like, that's a minimum.
Yep.
That's if it's a 0-yard touchdown for whatever reason. But if it's a 1-yard touchdown, right, that's 7.1. We only need 9 points basically to justify this play. I think there's a chance he goes off with how Goff does that. And again, with the Rams' problems. And I have him number 2 because I'm assuming Laporta doesn't play. This is exactly what you look for in these slate, is somebody basically as cheap comes who has a great matchup and will be involved, because again, he had a 2-touchdown game last year. A guy named Shane Zylstra, who I've never freaking heard of for the Lions, he had a 3-touchdown game last year. Jared Goff loves throwing to tight ends. And this is just, to me, a perfect storm.
I mean, God help me. You really talked me into this one last night. I have him number 2 as well.
Yes.
Like I said, it's a plus matchup. It's a guy that, we know wants to look for his tight end. And we've also got injuries, elsewhere as well that makes you think, besides, obviously, the true final is going to be to Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Right.
But,
and we'll get into him. Obviously, we'll be talking a lot about Amon-Ra, I promise.
Again, yeah, and you go to the PFF matchup now. Laporta they have listed as having the 3rd best matchup, and obviously
he's Laporta, yeah.
Right, but I mean the point is the coverage grades for the linebackers for the Rams are not good. So yeah, this is a team that's struggled to cover tight ends. You've got a guy who is in an offense that has heavily featured the tight end. He's walking into that, and we've seen it happen before. With obviously Isaiah Likely is a guy that we were less surprised because there was some hype from him as a pass catcher coming out of the draft. But yeah, you see guys all the time who
Janu Smith with Kyle Pitts in the line.
With Kyle Pitts, where as long as you're a competent tight end, you have a reasonable athleticism and receiving ability. If you're in an offense that heavily features the tight end, you will usually do well if you step into that slot. So, and again, I think this is, 1A or 1B for where we're going to see a ton of points this weekend. So, yeah, and then throw in the price point. I mean, we're paying $3,000.
You can't beat that. So because there is a lot of good tight end matchups. I mean, we talked about it. It's a lot of lineups probably that I have 2 of them, because there's other guys I think have great matchups. For me, there's 3 other names I keep coming back to, and it feels so disrespectful that Travis Kelce is not even.
I was going to say he's not one of them, right?
Not even a consideration, and it feels so disrespectful.
It's weird because Miami hasn't been great against tight ends this year, but I'm with you because he's the highest price, and normally I'd say we got Travis Kelce
right
at 6,100.
One of our rules last year was don't spend on tight end unless their name's Travis Kelce.
It could absolutely burn us, obviously, but it's going to be 3 degrees with 17-mile-an-hour winds. It might snow. And, that defense has been playing better as of late overall. Big Fangio's a smart defensive coordinator. In the past game, I assume he's going to be trying to control Travis Kelce. And, lo and behold, that London game that these teams played, Kelce had 3 receptions on 4 targets for 14 yards.
Our boy Allen made a great point too, Joe, that
I can't do it.
You think that those wide receivers who can't catch a ball all year are going to be catching it when it's 0 degrees at night with wind and shit? No way.
No, not taking that bet.
Yeah, so of course they're going to try to cover Kelce. So for me, then you got Goddard, right? Is that one of yours?
Yes.
I think you have to consider Ferguson. What about you?
Okay.
Is that
Ferguson? Yeah.
And then the two for me that I'm going back and forth on are Otten, because again, if Baker is limited, which I think he will be, I don't think he's going to be able to really push it.
Right. Is that maybe good for Cade Otten?
That's good for Cade Otten, again, against the Eagles defense. And then the other guy, obviously, is a supernova in Buffalo, Dalton Kincaid, who I kind of like the fact that that's a bad weather game for him, because, again, maybe Allen's not chunking it down the field, and he really has been sort of their, like, Wes Welker role, it seems like. You know what I'm saying? Where he's in the slot a lot. It's a lot of little underneath stuff. He catches, a 5-yard pass, gets 8-10 yards. Which of those guys would you go next? Do you agree, though, those are kind of the four names you're circling to? Or is there another one I'm missing?
For me, it's those guys. Obviously, listen, if you want to fire up Travis Kelce at 6,100, I'm not going to say, like, you're crazy, because we might be the crazy ones not doing it. But, I mean, yeah, it's, if Luke Musgrave were still hurt, maybe I like Kraft at 3,300, but Dallas has been good against tight ends. Pat Freiermuth, listen, I don't really want any part of the Steelers offense for the most part. So that's out. So yeah, for me, I think it's those four guys as well. The guy I ended up not going with is Otten, just because, again, I'm just so worried about what that offense is right now. He hasn't had
a big game. I mean, like, he's had the one game, and other than that, he hadn't even scored more than 10 points in any other game, which that's concerning.
To be fair, he hasn't faced the Matt Patricia defense yet, so there's there's hope.
You're right, yeah.
But yeah, ultimately, he is the guy who I ended up pushing out, even though obviously he's at a way lower price point. But yeah, you can just look at those other guys. I know Goddard has coming off a bad game against the Giants, but he didn't play the second half. But yeah, he had 2 solid games before that.
20 targets his last 3 full games.
Yeah, and then. You also factor in that A.J. Brown's banged up. We're not 100% that he's a go.
We're not even sure Devontae Smith's anywhere near 100%.
So there's a lot of questions about the receivers, which means we could see a more heavy focus on Goddard. So I love that. Again, I'm all in on the Dallas offense. Again, I'm not necessarily 100% all in on the run game because it's been spotty all year, but 100% in on the pass game. So love Ferguson. And then, just overall, who's the best receiver? It might just be Kincaid, who, is coming into his own. Although, like you said, some concern there in the weather, though less for the tight ends than the wide receivers. So, yeah, for me, it ultimately ended up being Goddard, Ferguson, Kincaid, which feels dumb because that's in order of expense. But we're talking about $100 difference, so I'm not super worried about it. Tampa Bay has been awful against tight ends. And the fact that the receivers are banged up makes Goddard the number 3 guy for me.
Yeah, Ferguson. I'm going to get into Brandon Cooks, who is going to shock a lot of people at the wide receiver position for me. But similar with Ferguson, 8 double-digit games this year. 6 of them came at home. So the one guy I do want to just bring up, because I feel like we're dismissing him, and it's one of those mistakes that I make and everybody makes. You see that number 1 versus tight ends. It's like, I'm not even going to consider him. It's Dalton Schultz, because
I don't hate it.
They got to throw to somebody, right? He scored 14 points in the first game versus Cleveland team, 11 targets, 8 receptions. That probably had something to do with, I know that they got a lot of pressure on Stroud. He also had 7 targets last week. I mean, that's the one that I'm going, maybe I am missing something here, because, again, 4,400, if you're talking about volume for price, like Brock Wright, I still like better because of the matchup, the way the team plays. He's $1,400 cheaper. But, I mean, who's going to get 7 to 10 targets that's 4,400 at tight end? You know what I mean? It's Dalton Schultz. He's the one guy I wonder if I'm sleeping on him.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Cleveland was awesome against tight ends all year, 33.2 yards according to CBS Sports, which is the lowest in the NFL. But 3 of their last 5 games, now this wasn't to all one player, this is combined tight ends, but 3 of their last 5 games they gave up over 70 yards to tight ends, which, as you said, included the Texans. And also 4 of the 7 touchdowns they've given up to tight ends came in the last 5 weeks. So I do think there's an argument too, especially because people are going to look, unless you're going deep dive, you see Dalton Schultz, number one defense against tight ends, you're writing him off.
You just immediately
he has a big game, and he's in your lineup. That's a humongous advantage over everyone else, especially because, again, outside of if you do decide to go with Kate Otten or if you're going Brock Wright, all the other guys we're talking about are more expensive than Dalton Schultz. So I do think there's a fair argument for that. Obviously, I feel safer for the guys who are facing, bottom 10, 12 defenses against tight ends. But that's also, like I said, of the outdoor games, that's the cleanest weather game that we're going to have. It's 62 degrees. Oh, actually, Houston's indoors anyway. Never mind.
No, it's a dome. Yeah.
But yeah, even if it was outdoors, it's going to be 62 degrees in Houston. So enjoy that, people going to that game. But yeah, that's a dome game. We're not worried about the weather. You're making me second guess like whether he should be in.
I just wanted to bring, no.
It's close. To me, I think it's close.
But to me, I think you should stick with those top three. And I agree with you. To me, it's Goddard, like it's third, right, and Njoku. And you can only play two. That's the one thing about tight end. Like, no matter how much you love them, you can only play two, so don't think too much. All right, the wide receiver, and then we'll get into the shit show that is the running back. I'm going to shock everybody. I do. I have number one, Brandon Cooks.
Wow.
Price 49. And again, remember now, I don't want people to think I'm smoking crack. We are talking about with their price, right?
Right.
Obviously, I'm going to get into some expensive guys in just a second that I love. But he's 4,900. And it's just, again, I talked about the difference in the home road splits, right? We've had since week 6, 12 games. They're scoring, 2 touchdowns more at home. But it shouldn't surprise people. That means Cook also. So first of all, since week 6, 10 plus points and 8 of 12. 8 touchdowns in that span. So he scored a touchdown in 8 of his last 12 games. Again, Dallas at home, 38.5 points, 24 on the road. So it's no surprise. On the road, his number's not great since week 6. 4.3 targets, 3 receptions per, 24 yards per game, not even 9 points on DK. The home splits, it's ridiculous. Over 5 targets, 4.5 receptions, 72.6 yards, 17.65 points per game on DK, 14.2 or more, and 5 of 6. That's the big thing, is like his floor game to me is, I think, going to be that 3 times number. And, I talked about all those touchdowns. He scored a touchdown in 5 of his last 6 home games. And I don't, if you look, this Green Bay defense has struggled with number 2 receivers. And obviously, if you're Green Bay, not that you can, we've been, it's been proven this year you can't stop CeeDee Lamb. But obviously, they're going to try to stop CeeDee Lamb. So that's going to open it up for Cooks. And not only that, I love Cooks has been a baller in the playoffs for a bunch of different teams. I kind of have a feeling the whole reason they went and got him is for what's happening right now. And he's already been showing out. I just feel at 4,900, you're not going to get more bang for your buck. And it would not shock me if he had a 20-plus point game either. But the great thing about Cooks is if he scores 10 points, it's not going to kill you, right? You're still going to get 2 times your price. You're okay. If you play in these guys in the 7K or more and they get you 10 points, boy, you are now fighting a uphill battle. That is why I have him first.
Yeah, I mean, the guy I left for dead, and then as the season went on, especially like you said, in those home games, he's been super productive. So I don't have Cooks, but I am of a similar mind of, as much as I am going to have some of the higher price guys, just because I kind of feel like some of them are can't miss this week. I'm going Demarcus Robinson at 3,600.
He's on my list.
Again, a guy who didn't play last week because despite the bar I went to having like 4 TVs putting the Niners Rams game that mattered to neither team on. Demarcus Robinson didn't play because he knew it didn't matter. Previous 5 weeks, though,
I wish I would have known, Joe. I told you, like the lineup I finished won 3K in. I finished 1 point out of second, which would have been 6K. I had Demarcus Robinson in my lineup. I literally won $3,000 in a 200 single entry where the guy scored 0 points. He didn't play. I feel so stupid. Oh my God.
That just shows how great the rest of your lineup was.
It's fair, but you're sitting there going, I could have literally picked any guy and they probably would have got 1 point. That's literally, I was 0.9 points. It's like, oh my God, how does this happen?
Of course, I mean, that's the thing with DeMar. Well, I guess he was priced much higher for that week. So I was going to say.
He was 1,000 more. He was 4,600.
Right, which again, that's the other thing is I think you have to remember pricing is just going to be different in the playoffs because of the lack of volume that we have. We have 6 games. And it's not going to be a higher number than that as we go. But yeah, Demarcus Robinson, 5 straight games with at least 13 points. Scored touchdowns in 4 of 5 games. Broke 80 yards in 6 receptions the last 2 games he played. Like I said, as you mentioned earlier when we were talking about Stafford, it's not like, what are we afraid of with this Lions defense? Not really anything. This is not a great defense. They give up 49 yards. No, not in the second. Obviously, Hayden Hutchinson is awesome, and I don't want to disparage him. And Brian Branch is pretty good, but yeah, not a great one. 49 yards per game to wide receiver 3s, which doesn't sound awful, but that puts you about 20th in the NFL. So they're not good against wide receiver 3s. And Demarcus Robinson is not a normal 3. And in general, I mean, the Rams run 11 personnel like 90% of the time or 80-something for like every year.
He has 3 catches for 49 yards, Joe. That's 7.9 points. We're already
we're not
there.
We're okay. And yeah, the fact is we're in play for 20 plus at 3,600, which I don't think there's a better under 4,000 bet for a 20-point game than Demarcus Robinson this week. So yeah, as much as obviously there's going to be guys we're about to go through who it's like, slam this guy. This is, a guaranteed 100 yards maybe even. And then the other thing too is the Lions are primarily a zone defense. And Demarcus Robinson has been better against zone this year, where he's like barely over a yard per route run against man. So that's considering how productive he's been as of late. That tells you how efficient he's been against zone. How efficient really this entire offense is against zone, which is another reason. Love stacks.
Especially my guy Cooper, who I'll get into in a few.
Yeah, and it's also of the stacks you can do with Stafford, it's the cheapest one. Yep. So. Yeah, that's why DeMarcus is number 1 for me.
I love it. All right, so we both have a cheap guy. I went back and forth. I'm going to go Amon-Ra as my second guy. I mean, Raymond's almost assuredly out. I don't think Laporta's going to play. I love that St. Brown has been Mr. Consistency. Like, I had him in all my fantasy leagues this year, and the great thing about St. Brown is there is 0% chance. I'll go ahead and jinx it if he doesn't that he's going to score like 9-10 points. He just doesn't do that. Like, he catches 6-7 balls. But what makes me feel so much better is we're at home. And his home splits this year are really spectacular. So over 22 points per game in the home games this year, at least 18.2 in each one of them. Averaging almost 10 targets, 9.6, at least 7 in every home game this year. Over 7 receptions. At least 6, again, every single game. Over 100 yards receiving, at least 70 in every single game. And he's got 4 touchdowns. I mean, again, their top 2 pass catchers are going to be out. We think the Rams are going to score. Like, it's just a perfect storm for him. Now, the thing about St. Brown that is concerning, I know he had the monster game last week. He rarely has that. Like, he rarely has that, like, 35, 40-point outing, which that does make it, a little less appealing because the rest of the guys above him, I mean, they definitely could have, like the Lambs and the Hills and those, like they could have, 40 points. But I just feel like he's so safe. And again, for cash game and these small slates, if I'm spending $8K, I want to make sure it's a layup, and this is a layup.
Yeah, we're 100% on the same page here. We're all things considered, when we're looking at, the weather, the matchups, to me, it's Amon-Ra and CD are the 2 guys where if they don't go off, I will be shocked. Because again, you look at the Rams, and you're going to talk about Kupp, and I think there's a lot of reasons to love Kupp. But you still have, Robinson, you still have Nakua, even more predominantly. There's always the chance it's one of their games. And as much as I think Brandon Cooks could have a big game, it's unlikely Brandon Cooks has a better game than CD. And at this point...
it's impossible, I think.
Yeah. And at this point, without Laporta, I don't see anyone who's going to have a better game than Amon-Ra. Other than Brock Wright, who's going to go off for 25 and win us a ton of money. But, yeah, I just look at, again, it's indoors. There's reason to believe he will get fed more than he normally gets fed.
Which, again, almost 10 targets, 9.5.
Right. Like, that's a terrifying idea. Well, I mean, not for us. It's an exciting idea.
Right.
But it's a terrifying idea for the Rams. So, yeah, for me, there's no reason to go against it. I think, and again, PFF's wide receiver versus corner matchups, the top three, it's CD, it's AJ, who, again, we're not even sure will play against Tampa Bay, and it's Amon-Ra. Those are the top three guys. And after that, you get Rashee Rice. These are the guys who they gave an excellent rating to this week. Rashee Rice is fourth, but again, night game in the snow. And then it's Evans and Godwin, who, again, if Baker is healthy, I'm firing one of those guys up in this top five probably. But because I don't feel safe about that at all, again, the Panthers defense is lively sometimes, but you scored 9 points against them. That's bad. So, yeah, for me, it's Amon-Ra has to be number 2 just because I think, given everything, I think his ceiling is right there with everyone, maybe give or take Lamb. And I think he has the highest floor in this entire field at any skill position. So, yeah, I'm with you. It's Amon-Ra number 2.
All right, so third, I got Kupp. I feel really strong about this. And I know a lot of people are afraid. I get it. You got Puka. But it's a big difference in the games that Kupp has played with Puka. Like, most of his monster games have all came in games that Kupp has not played. Kupp, 12 games this season, 7+ targets and 9 of 12. 2 of the 3 games, he didn't hit that number. He didn't finish the game. Touchdown in 3 of his last 4. But for me, it's just all about what he did with Stafford in the last playoff run. 4 games, 42 targets, 33 receptions, 478 yards, 6 touchdowns. And if you don't remember, that was with teams knowing the Rams were going to Cooper Kupp. Like, they knew this is where they're going. Right. And they still won a Super Bowl that way. Those, just for if you're wondering, that averages out 10.5 targets, over 8 receptions, 120 yards, and 1.5 touchdowns. I feel at 7,500, he's a bargain. Like, I think I do think Kupp has the ability to be the highest scoring receiver this week. And he's 7,500. And that's the difference. Even with him and St. Brown, I love him. And they set him for a reason. He is the most important piece to the Rams going on this, potential Super Bowl run, which I do think is alive. They know that it's going to be that. And, again, it's a playoff game. Stafford's never played a playoff game with Demarcus Robinson. He's never played a playoff game with Puka. He's never played a playoff game with Kyron Williams. He's played a playoff game? Played 4 and won a Super Bowl, Cooper Kupp. I love Kupp. I love that he's rested. Older guy, got 2 weeks off. I'm all over it. He's my third, and I think, again, he'll probably be in a majority of my lineups.
Yeah, he ultimately didn't make my 5 just because I am a little worried about the potential for a spread the ball out type of situation. But I mean, just to further your point though, for why there's reason to believe in this, according to FTN Fantasy's charting, the Lions give up the second most yards to number 1 wide receivers in the NFL this year, 89 yards a game. The only team that's worse was Washington, who was over 100 because God, was Washington awful. But yeah, you're talking about the second worst team at covering number 1 wide receivers this season on a pure yardage basis. So, and yeah, Cooper Kupp with Matthew Stafford in the playoffs has obviously been wildly successful. My third guy, this is kind of a dependent pick where if Christian Watson plays, Jayden Reed would not be my number 3. It seems pretty 50-50 right now. Watson's been limited. He was limited last week during practice, didn't end up suiting up. Obviously, it's the playoffs. It's more likely he suits up this week. But I don't even know if he'll play his normal allotment of snaps. But if Watson does not play, Jaden Reed, without Watson on the field, last 4 weeks, is averaging over 20 points per game. And his low is 17. He's had at least now last week against Chicago, it was 4 targets. Those 4 targets went for 4 receptions to 112 yards. So it's safe to say he's got a strong connection right now with Jordan Love. The other 3 games, he had at least 6 receptions and 8 targets, 3 touchdowns over that time span. And I just think because Dallas is going to be lighting up the Green Bay defense, as good as Dallas's defense is, and it's quite good. I just think if you're giving Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur, who I think they're going to lose this game, but I would rather have Matt LaFleur calling my plays than Mike McCarthy for whatever that's worth. So the fact that you've got, I think, one of the best play callers, you're indoors, you're going to have to probably drop back 40 plus times if you want to stay in this one. And when Watson's not out there, I think Reed is the clear number one. Also, this Dallas defense, heavy man defense.
Yep.
And by far the 2 most productive receivers this year against man defense for Green Bay have been Reed and Watson. Those have been the 2 guys.
And by the way, Reed's going to get a few carries, we know too, which I love. He's like mini Debo.
Right. We love the bonus carries because you never know. One of those springs and, you get yourself the Debo Samuel 20-yard touchdown before you add up all the receptions and yardage from that. So, yeah, for me, if Watson's out, Reed is a hammer play for me. If he plays, I think both of those guys are in contention for me because Watson, I believe, is down at 4,500.
He's 45. Yeah, Watson, if he plays, is a definite top 5 for me.
Where, for me, it's kind of like if Watson doesn't play, Reed at 5,700 becomes a hammer, and if Watson plays and it's I'd be reading deep on those reports because if he's playing and it's like, oh, he's going to play a majority, 80% of the snaps, Watson becomes the hammer play. Otherwise, if it sounds like he's going to, run a few deep routes and otherwise not be out there, I'd still be putting Reed in because I think one of these guys is going to have a super productive game. It could be both because, again, I think Dallas, I put it 50-50 that Dallas scores 5 touchdowns in this game. So they're going to have to try and keep up, and one of these guys is going to eat.
Yeah, I love that. Godwin's my next guy. I want Evans so bad, but I just can't trust Baker. But to me, whether it's him or it's Trey Palmer, you have to have a Tampa wide receiver with what we've seen happen to this Philadelphia secondary all of a sudden. They can't stop anybody.
Rough.
And Godwin, it's just his volume's up. Last 5, 46 targets, 30 receptions, 5 straight games of 10-plus points, averaging almost 17 per game, which that'd be, again, right around that 3 times number at his price. And just Baker being limited, more underneath stuff, that's Godwin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Evans is the down-the-field guy. Godwin is up close. And I could see the Bucs, if they go, well, if we got to, complete 12 7-yard passes to Godwin – to keep this offense moving, they'll do that. And I just think because of that, with the matchup, he has to be on that list. I have him 4th.
Yeah, it's one of those ones again. I would love the matchups if we had some excitement there for these Tampa Bay wide receivers. But I ultimately agreed with you, though. I have him 5, not 4. But because of the injury, if Baker's healthy, it's Mike Evans for me.
Mm-hmm.
But because he's not, I like Godwin at 5. The Eagles this year, again, according to FTN Fantasy, again, this won't sound like an impressive number. 53 yards per game, 2 wide receiver 2s. That ranks 28th in the NFL. So the only other playoff teams right next to them are Green Bay, Detroit, and Kansas City. And we've already talked up Brandon Cooks. We've already talked up 2 receivers playing Detroit. So, yeah, I think you have, if we're talking top 5, you got to be willing to roll the dice on, the team facing Matt Patricia and his disintegrating defense.
So I have him.
It's CD. I could not have CD on the list. I know he's 9,000. I know that's fucking insane. I mean, the guy has had at least 10 targets in every game since week 13. He's had at least 9 targets in every game since week 8. He has 3 40-point games since week 8. And again, it's Joe Barry's defense that I don't believe in whatsoever. So I know Jair Alexander, he had that weird suspension because he decided to go out for the coin toss when he wasn't supposed to, and then almost decided to play defense rather than defer, which is a very important distinction.
Luckily, the ump's like, I don't think you want to do that.
It's like, are you sure about that? And he's like, no. But the reality is Jair Alexander has also just not played like Jair Alexander, former All-Pro. Because, it's like I said, when you look at that PFF wide receiver advantage, CD is number 1. And again, that top 6, it's CD, AJ, who we're not sure will play, Amon-Ra, Rashee Rice, who's going to play in the worst possible conditions, and then it's Evans and Godwin. So that's why I think you do throw that dart on one of those guys. But yeah, I just couldn't not have CD in because I like Amon-Ra probably slightly more straight up just because I feel more certain about, well, of course I just named how many targets CD has. So I think they're 1A, 1B for me across.
So, I mean, that's to me the big deal.
Yeah.
It's 1,300 more for Lamb. I have
those are my top 2 overall, regardless of price. Those are the top 2 players this weekend, and I just couldn't not have both of them on my list, even though I hate going chalk, but gave you Jamarcus and Jay.
No.
Hopefully that's enough.
I don't think that's going chalk, bro. That's just playing the numbers. So obviously I don't have Lamb on my list, but there's already been 2 lineups. I figured out a way to get them in. Anytime I can justify it, I'm going to have them in. I'm going to give you 2 names that I really would pay attention to. The first is Josh Reynolds with the Detroit Lions. I know people are going to talk about Jameson Williams. Reynolds is, had several guys. I think it's 7 games with 9+ points. He's had 4 games with 12 points or more. He's actually had 2 20-point games, which Williams hadn't done all season. And if Raymond and Laporte are out, his volume's going to be up. But the guy I really like, Quez Watkins, Philadelphia Eagles. 3,500. He's only played 2 games this season. In those 2 games, 15 targets, 11 receptions, 121 yards. But the big deal for me and why he's on this list, Tampa Bay is one of the worst defenses in the league versus receivers in the slot. Quez Watkins, when he's on the field, lines up in the slot 73% of the time. Hurts is a little banged up. Brown's a little banged up. Smith is a little banged up. And in a game last week that both Julio and Watkins played, it was Watkins who played more snaps, ran more routes. And that was even before they started kind of taking everybody out. And I know most of his big numbers came with Mariota, but I actually think that Watkins, they know, is the better player. Obviously, he's the better receiver in the slot. Julio's never really been a guy that you line up in the slot a lot and have a lot of success. And I think that is somewhere that they can really attack Tampa Bay. I always go back to Josh Downs, highest target. He didn't have a huge game, but the most targets he had in the game other than playing Tampa was 9. He had 14 targets when he played Tampa, and Josh Downs lines up in the slot more than any wide receiver in the NFL. So I think Quez Watkins at 3,500 has got a chance to be a real sleeper. On the other side, I'd also look at Trey Palmer, 3,400, for the same reasons that were with Godwin.
Right.
If you don't want to play Godwin, Palmer's another guy that's not going to be really going down the field a lot. He's more of an underneath receiver. He's 3,400. And the Eagles are they're awful versus. So.
Right, and then that one obviously is just super low risk because you're not spending a lot of money on that one. Where obviously, if Godwin or Evans tanks, you're going to be out your $6,000-$7,000 there.
All right, let's wrap this thing up with the very difficult task of doing the running backs. For me, don't spend. That's pretty much. I'm serious.
Yeah. I'm laughing because yes,
I don't feel comfortable with any of these guys.
It's all scary.
the one guy I feel confident with at their price is Najee Harris. Like, he's the one guy that I will have. And right now he's in every lineup I have. I think he's 5,600. Is that right? I don't want to get the price wrong. Harris has been, he's 5,400, even better.
54, yeah.
It's just, I told you this stat last night and you're kind of like, whoa. And it was the same deal for me when looking at it. His last 3 games, 72 rush attempts, at least 19 in every one of them. He has taken over the lead back. And in those games, he's doing work with it too. 312 yards, 4 touchdowns, 68 points on DK. And this is a Buffalo team that at times you've been able to run on. We know it's going to be a bad weather game. Najee Harris is a very physical back. I just think he is the safest play. But then honestly, like with Harris, I'm looking at Singletary. I'm looking at Ford. I mean, I'm considering Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I'm looking at those guys because I think James Cook, is that who you're with too? Are the only guys that are kind of semi-expensive that you feel pretty good about, or is even he on that list?
So for me, the 2 guys, I mean, you can talk yourself in or out of pretty much every running back in the slate,
right?
Which is what makes it so difficult because, I mean, obviously, listen, the guy who was most productive in the regular season was Kyren Williams, and then you go, I think this game's a shootout. Why wouldn't Kyren Williams do well? Well, then obviously Detroit is the number 1 defense against running backs. Rachaad White, king of volume. Do we just trust that offense, though, with a banged-up Baker? What happens there? So the 2 guys that I like, again, Cook, I'm worried about the touchdown vulture stuff. And obviously the last few weeks have not been awesome. But, again, you don't ever want to overreact. Where his last 3 weeks weren't great, but then you go to the previous 5 and you're like, he was incredible. So the guy I actually kind of have talked myself into a lot, and I'm rolling the dice on him as my number 1 because again, I just kind of think I don't have a strong feel for this. I feel like it's kind of shooting darts here. I like Pacheco. I mean, obviously he's been banged up a little bit this season, but 3 of the last 4 games he suited up for, he broke 20 points. He scored 4 touchdowns over his last 4 games. And then, it's a night game in Kansas City where it's going to be 3 degrees with 17-mile-an-hour winds and a chance of snow. That's the sort of game where I want the running back. And I want the running back on the team I think is going to win because Miami could absolutely win this game the way Kansas City's gone down the stretch. But if you're going to ask me to just bet against Reed, Mahomes, and that team, I mean, I think the 2 best coached teams in the NFL are Kansas City and Baltimore, and I don't actually think it's close. So that team at home, I'm betting on them. And if that's the case, I got to like the running back in the snow because if I think the team's going to win and it's going to be in that weather and he's run super well and been super productive when he's been out there, that's the guy I'm rolling with, and probably, I think most likely when I build my lineups, I'm going to probably have a Jones or a Pacheco, or even again, any one of these guys, I'm going to spend over $6,000, and then the other guy, I'm trying to go cheap because I don't want to. Like you said, it's too scary. I don't want to be like, here's Kyren Williams and James Cook, and there goes $14,000 on my lineup when I feel so much more confident in other spots. But yeah, my number 1 is Pacheco.
All right. I really am. I think that you have to, I do like that Pacheco. He's on my list, but I think
and the one thing that scares me,
other than just take a cheaper one, right? Like to me, that's the formula. Like
yeah,
to me, it's
Najee
Harris
I like about
figuring out the other guy.
The one thing that scares me about Najee is just, like you said, he's been on a roll lately, which I had not realized till you told me that yesterday. But it's also, you're beating Cincinnati easily. You're in a close game with Seattle. You're in a close game with Baltimore. I mean, if Buffalo, because of who they are, this could go either way. Like, if Buffalo wins by 30, I won't be shocked. And in that case, I don't think it's going to be a good Najee Harris game.
I kind of will in that weather, though. Like, I don't see Buffalo
that's true.
just rolling It does scare me, obviously, that Watt's out. Like, that's the only reason I'm not 100% in on this, is that I just feel like at his price,
That's fair.
5,400, he's averaging, 19, at least 19 rush attempts per game.
Right, because who else are you even playing under that? It's pretty much Jalen Warren and then no one that I feel remotely good about. So, and you got to like Harris more than Warren, particularly because of that weather, because passing's going to be difficult. So I think you're right that Harris is kind of the cheap play.
Get into your next one, Joe. Of course, I just see that my computer needs to reboot real quick. So get into your next one. I'll be right back. I don't know what's going on. Sorry about that.
I don't have a strong vibe on really any of these, but I kind of like the alternative play of Singletary against Cleveland because, like Keith, I think Houston will win this game because I don't know. I just don't believe in this Cleveland team that much. God bless Joe Flacco. I think Kevin Stefanski being coach of the year potentially while being the offensive play caller of a bottom 6 team in offensive DVOA is insane. But yeah, I just think Houston's going to win. If I think the team is going to win, I like that running back automatically because that's the guarantee with running backs is you're winning the game. You're more likely to see carries. Singletary has largely taken over this backfield down the stretch. 4 of his last 5 games, double-digit points. And one of those games is against Tennessee. Scores 24 points against Tennessee. Tennessee is a defense that we've talked about all the time. That's a funnel defense where they funnel you towards the pass because their run defense is usually strong. The pass defense is terrible. So the fact that Singletary went off in that game makes me feel good. And then, that's also, I believe that was a game without Stroud where, that meant he got more carries, but also you could load the box before. That's not happening with Stroud. I forget the name of the commenter who mentioned earlier, Denzel Ward's probably out. So that weakens the pass defense as well. Makes it harder to stack bodies. So yeah, it's kind of a counterintuitive play, although, I guess Cleveland's 15th against running backs, whereas, Tampa Bay's 3rd. So maybe it's not as counterintuitive as I'm thinking, but just because this is the best defense that's playing this week, I think not a lot of people are going to be on the Devin Singletary train. And again, he's already bucked expectations before by having a big game against a good run defense. So if you're like me, you think Houston wins, I like the Singletary play. If you think Cleveland wins this game, don't listen to me on this at all. Go somewhere else. But that's where I'm rolling the dice.
So I'm sorry, you said you went with Singletary?
Yes, I went with Singletary.
I want to get weird for a second because the guys basically I have on this list. I'll go ahead and tell you.
Let's get super weird.
We know we got the Najee Harris. I agree with you that like Singletary, Ford, like these guys in that kind of 5,000 range, I like. I'm with you with Pacheco. I am looking a lot at like playoff Lenny, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, these guys that like particularly the Kansas City, yes. And particularly Edwards-Helaire. We know McKinnon's out. And I kind of have a feeling the Chiefs are going to end up just dusting the Dolphins in this, bad weather game. I mean, I don't know if Miami has the record like a lot of these warm weather teams where, they haven't won a game in this weather for forever, but it's not going to be fun for them. And then the other guy I keep circling, which again, I'm just looking for, can I get 10, 12 points out of those? What about Rico Dowdle for the Dallas Cowboys?
Ooh, okay.
With the way that they've used him lately, the fact that we think the Cowboys are going to score at will, maybe they get up big. I could see them, maybe saying we're going to rest Tony Pollard, right? Like we don't want to give him too many carries. And not to mention Dowdle honestly has looked, having watched the Washington game, because unfortunately that was one of the 2 games that we got in my area last week. He looked like the more explosive, better back. So that's the, kind of those 3 cheap guys is playoff Lenny, Helaire, and Dowdle that I keep circling and going, Maybe that's the answer. You play it with Pacheco, you play it with Najee Harris, and then maybe I can get Lamb, Kupp, and Brown with Brock Wright and Njoku into a lineup.
Yeah, I like that thought process. Dow's the guy I always kind of forget about, and then you throw him out there. I'm like, oh yeah, that could make sense if you get up big, and then again, it's like we said, we've seen this team drop 40 on a lot of people, so I like that one. My third guy is I'm ultimately going with James Cook, just because I think Buffalo is. I don't know that they're going to again win by 30 points because of that weather, where otherwise I think they really could.
Oh, I do too.
A better weather game.
I think it helps Pittsburgh, don't you? But it helps James Cook as well. But I'm saying, like, I think this game could turn into an ugly run it out. Josh Allen runs for a bunch of, like, the Buffalo's going to, kind of like what they did against Miami last week, right? Where it was just a lot of runs.
Right. And then obviously the one thing that, like, the reason that I'm not all in on James Cook, because I think otherwise I might be, is just because Josh Allen is a touchdown vulture. Which is also an argument, I think, for, like, there's a chance that Josh Allen is actually, even though he's the most expensive quarterback, and I'm not quite ballsy enough to do that in that weather. It's like if anyone could throw it all in terrible weather, it's Josh Allen. And
not
then
to mention any game that he has to run more, you got to like.
Right. It's like he might run for 3 touchdowns. So that could be a good, like, everyone's kind of bailing because he's expensive and it's bad weather, and it turns out he's great. But yeah, my 3 and 4 are Cook and Harris because, again, I think you get into that weather. Yeah, you're going to want to. You're just not going to be able to do much else because 28-mile-an-hour winds. Because that's what people always talk about. Is like it can be cold,
right?
And if it's if it's still, and as long as it's not like -10 or something, you can still pass the ball. Like, but once you get 20-plus-mile-an-hour winds, and it could be snow showers. I mean that's your classic. The games we remember watching fondly, even when it's like kind of a bad game, because it's just. You're trying to figure out where the yard markers are because it's covered in snow. All your memories from those games are running backs. It's like LaShawn McCoy scoring a touchdown in the snow. It's not,
no angel.
You don't remember a lot of great passes in the snow. So, yeah, to me, it's Cook and Harris. And again, Jalen Warren I think is not a terrible play either, just because the two cheapest running backs.
Pittsburgh's going to get down, right? Like if you're on your side that you think Buffalo is going to roll, it's probably Warren, not Harris, that you should be playing, don't you think?
Yeah, I think there's a better argument for Warren in those games. And again, also the upside too is you're not passing the ball deep downfield in this situation.
That's what I'm saying. It's like
Jalen Warren comes in and gets his 4 or 5 receptions. But I think the reason to go Harris over Warren is. There's the chance of the 20-point game because it's hard to see the Warren 20-point game. Harris is coming off back-to-back ones, but I will be surprised if Jalen Warren does not give you double-digit points and he costs 5,100. So I think he's also a very reasonable play.
All right, I know you got one more. I do want to just mention this, kind of like I did with the other, not to just continue to add more stuff to think about, but there is a chance that we're missing the A-Chain Mostert play here.
Yeah.
Kansas City has
you gotta think about it.
Really struggled against the run some as of late. Green Bay, these are all in their last 6, 129 yards, 5.2 yards per carry. Buffalo, 118 yards, 4.2 yards per carry. Las Vegas, 154 yards, 5.4 yards per carry. I think McDaniels knows for them to win, they got to run the ball. He's probably the best schemer, right, in the NFL.
Even more in that weather.
And I look at what A-Chain did last week. They were running it all over Buffalo with him. And I don't know if he just lost his nerve after that punt return touchdown. I don't know if they were conserving because it felt like at times Miami was more concerned about just trying to get out of there as healthy as possible than it was winning, but I could really see A-Chain, particularly at 6,800, having a monster game and us going, damn it, this guy has done this all year.
Absolutely.
And he's only 6,800 in an 8-team slate, and I just whiffed on him.
Right. I mean, because the Baltimore game too. It's like they lost that game by 37 points, and he scored 27 points. He had 107 yards and 14 carries. So it's not like A-Chain hasn't still been productive. I mean, obviously, the Jets-Dallas games back-to-back were not his best games. But, I mean, yeah, this is a guy.
Those are two of the best run defenses in the league, though.
Yeah.
This is not.
Yeah. And Baltimore is also one of the better defenses in the league. I mean, I think overall defense, it's top two. They ran for 107 yards on 14 carries. A guy on the season, 103 carries, it's not the largest sample size for running back, but it's big enough. He had 800 yards. So he's averaging almost 8 yards per carry on the season. And yeah, again, we're talking about another game where there's a chance for snow. It's windy. It's going to be awful out there. And I think the hard part for me is, again, I ultimately can't quite talk myself into picking Miami to beat Kansas City. Because of that weather, I don't think it's a super high scoring game. And then his price point is just, he's the third highest, and then the two guys ahead of him dominate their backfields. And in Kyron Williams' case, I do
look though, James Cook's 6,600, right? And that's again because I like Cook too. Yeah. My worry is I don't think I'm gonna have A-Chain in the lineup. And I'm telling you, when he ends up going for 170 yards,
I'm put him in one just because of exactly what we're talking about.
So mad at
100%.
So mad. So, who is your 5? I'm sorry, Joe. I know I got you sidetracked there.
So, I've gone back and forth on it. I'm rolling with David Montgomery because again, I like these low 6,000. Again, I know the Rams on the season, second on DK against running backs.
A lot of that, though, is that they're one of those teams. If you look at the numbers, it's more about they're not very good against the pass, and they have a very prolific offense, meaning that teams are down and throwing a lot. I don't like if you look at it by the numbers, this is not one of those defenses.
No.
Like some of the others we mentioned that just you can't run on. Right.
Because, adjusted line yards, they're 21st on the season. Again, 20th in DVOA. So, not the worst run defense, but not remotely a good one. There's a lot of factors in play there, to your point, where I kind of think both of these defenses a little bit. They're again, you have a game where it's the number one defense against running backs and number two. But I wouldn't be too afraid. Just because, like I said, I think the winner of this game is probably scoring 30 points. And if that's happening, I'm assuming
touchdown at least.
Yeah,
right?
Williams, Montgomery, Gibbs. There's probably going to be multiple touchdowns between those guys. And I just like Gibbs because, if you get into that, goal-to-go situation, he's the guy who's going to get it for Detroit. And he's just been so fucking steady. He's had one game all season where he didn't give us double-digit points. So in a week where...
I actually think he's been a lot better at home too, right? I know the Lions' offense is a lot better, but I believe most of his biggest games on DK have also came in home games.
I mean, his biggest game of the year was a road game, which was against Green Bay, which is, again, an argument for another guy that we're not talking about, which is Tony Pollard.
That makes me feel better about that Rico Dowdle, though, man.
Yeah, because, I mean, Pollard,
I can't trust Pollard. I just can't.
You know what? I might actually talk myself into Tony Pollard as my official number 5 play right now. Just because I am actually. Because now that I'm seeing again that what was the best Montgomery game was against Green Bay.
Hello.
Yeah. Again, I'm just going to bet again. I'm betting again on one of the best offenses that's playing this week against the first or second worst
40 points per
defense.
game over their last 6 home games.
Yeah, where again, this Green Bay defense. Historically, I can't remember the last time a Green Bay defense was good against the run. For one,
you've told me this for 3 years and been right.
Yeah, and then Joe Barry's defense has not changed that at all. So, yeah, I'm good. If I'm making a bet on what team scores the most points this weekend, is the Dallas Cowboys. And that might be true if all of these were dome games. I don't know that would change for me.
That's fair.
So that fact, yeah, I'm gonna feel too stupid if I don't have the running back on the team that I think scores 5 touchdowns in my top 5. So I'm putting Pollard at number 5, and maybe retrospectively I might even move him a little bit higher. But yeah, I want Pollard in my top 5. So especially because again, I like the guys in this lower 6,000 range because I just think this is all kind of a crapshoot.
I think you're making, though, my argument for – I think you've almost talked me into Donald. 4,600. He's had 2 games of 12 points or more in his last 4. It's also catching passes.
Would it be insane to play both of them?
No, not at all.
Right?
I will say, though, we're an hour and 25 minutes into this, and we are getting ready to –
We're going hard, baby.
We're landing this plane. But the running back is, without a doubt, the one that I'll just tell you, I don't feel confident. Like, hopefully by Sunday, if you reach out to me, I can tell you these are the guys that I feel confident on. But, like, receivers, tight ends, quarterbacks, I feel very good about everything we're talking about. Running back, I am still literally trying to work it out myself.
Yeah, give or take the Tampa Bay receiver plays just because I think the variance there is so high. But I think we had to put one of them in. Yeah. I feel, really strong about the other plays we're talking about. And then at running back, I'm all over the place because I can't make up my mind. And I guess, real quick on the defenses.
It's 2 of them, right? For me, it's Miami, KC. Take your pick.
Yeah, who do you think's going to win the game? Pick that defense. I think that's probably the best move you can make. Otherwise, $100 more. I don't hate the Texans one just because.
I do.
I don't.
No. I don't mean I hate the Texans. I mean, I'm not spending.
You hate the play?
I'm
just $100 more is my point.
But that's what I'm saying. I need that $100.
You need that 100?
Oh, man, I'm trying to, I'll go real quickly because we got a second. I'm going to go through the lineups that I've built already. I believe every one of them is to the dollar because why not, right? You got to do that. And so in these, for instance, I have one with Flacco, Cook, Harris, Lamb, Cup, Reynolds, Njoku, Wright, Dolphins, D. Every dollar spent. This one, again, every dollar spent. Stafford, Singletary, Harris, Cup, Reynolds, Robinson, Njoku, Lamb, Chiefs, D. And then the last one, again, every dollar is spent. And this is the one where I'm getting a little frisky. I know that. But Flacco, Harris, Singletary, Evans, Godwin, St. Brown, Wright, Njoku, KCD. I actually have 200 there, so I could get to the Texans lineup in that one. But you know how we feel about defenses that I want to take one of the bottom, really I'd like to take one of the bottom 4. But I look at it that the Chiefs have been so good. They haven't given up 30 points all season. It's crazy. I couldn't believe it when I saw they ain't given up 30 points all season. I just feel like those 2 defenses are the one, unless you feel like that somehow Pittsburgh without Watt is going to,
I think there's an argument for that.
I don't like the Rams or the Packers at all.
The Packers, for the 6th straight week in a row, I'm like, listen, we love to go cheap a defense. Don't go for the cheapest defense. Yeah. It's not going to work. The Rams, it's there's some possibility. It's Raheem Moore can scheme stuff up. Maybe
so you're saying the Texans is Flacco turns back into a pumpkin. Is that what it is?
Well, here's the thing about Flacco. He's had 5 starts this year. Guess how many times he has not thrown an interception in those 5 starts?
Has he?
He's thrown an interception every start.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
He has 9 turnovers total in the 5 games he's played. For all the Flacco renaissance, because, listen, it's worked out. They've won the games. That defense usually can hold after he throws the pick. And he's had a bunch of 300-yard games, so it's not like he's not producing. But he's still producing turnovers, which is the biggest thing we want, especially if one of those turnovers turns into a defensive score. In that case, then we're set.
Which, by the way, Texans have 3 defensive touchdowns. We'll see it. 2 of them came in the last 3 weeks.
So, and obviously, it's always hard to bet on that. But if a guy's going to give you 1 or 2 turnovers, if a guy's going to give you 1 or 2 turnovers, I think it's a good play. So, yeah, listen, if you need the $100 to spend somewhere else, spend the $100 somewhere else. But if they might be my favorite defensive play because, again, as someone who thinks Kansas City wins, I'll take the $100 if I can find it and spend it on the Texans.
I like it. If you can find it, would you do the Cowboys defense with how good they've been this year? At home, because it's just like the home road splits are also equally insane for them on defense.
I think I wouldn't, just because I think I like the Bills more. Just straight up, I think I like the Bills. I think the Bills, regardless of price, are my number one defense. It's bad weather. It's Mason Rudolph. It's a defense that's come, they really got banged up with all those injuries. We're a little off for a while, but closed really strong. Again, they just played Miami.
I can't believe they have 8 more sacks in Dallas, which nobody wants to talk about. 8 more sacks in Dallas, 54.
And another team where, again, you can't always bet on it, but a defensive touchdown in the last 2 games. So I guess, the one was a punt return. But, yeah, so for me, I would not go with Dallas just because I like the Bills more in that matchup. But, yeah, if you have the money at the end and you like the rest of your lineup, then sure, spend it on the Bills. But like you said, most of the lineups you and I are going to make, we're scrounging for every dollar.
Yep.
So it's Texans down for me.
All right. Well, again, we appreciate everybody sitting through an hour and a half of me and Joe talking this playoff slate. Tomorrow night, I'm going to be with Chris doing basically the DFS Den show.
Hell yeah.
And if you want to check over on Fantasy and Frames, me and Joe Matz will be back at it where we're going to give a lineup each. Is that what we decided, right? We'll basically kind of
we will build a lineup.
Which I really am excited about that. Me and Chris are going to do, what Chris and Dave normally do. And then I'm going to have a DFS
which is great stuff. So.
Oh, it's the best. And I'm going to have a DFS stacks article out tomorrow that I need to get started on right now. But again, if you don't play DFS, what are you doing? We're having all this. We just talked for an hour and a half. And I can talk for another hour and a half.
Do it now if you've never done it, which, if you're listening to this, you're probably not one of those people who's never done it. But on the off chance, this is the time to do it. Throw in your winnings, hopefully, from your season-long league and throw some of it into this and see if you can make some more.
And again, single entry double ups. If you're gonna get in,
don't do the huge fields.
Yeah, don't make it harder on yourself. But anything you want to plug, or?
I mean, I think you just plugged everything we need to plug.
Okay. Well,
keep it here on Fantasy Six Pack. Go over to Fantasy and Frames. Both of our homes, which are even outside of us, they're producing stuff as good or even better. Both places are phenomenal. Check it all out.
Yeah, and I honestly was not aware of this because I'm a moron, but apparently Fantasy Six Pack's baseball stuff is out of this world. I was not aware of that because I don't do fantasy baseball. But
I did it 1 year. It was actually great. It's the 1 year where I actually knew what I was talking about in regards to baseball. So that's the only time in the last 15 years I could say that. So maybe I'll get back into it and just devour all of our stuff that we've got on Fantasy Six Pack.
Yeah, you really need to check it out, though. I was talking to Joe Bond the other day, and I did not know that actually, believe it or not, more people visit the site for baseball than football, which is just wow. Because we get a good bit of people obviously visiting for football. But for Keith Flemming, Joe Matz, obviously, if you want to hit us up on Twitter, you can. Be sure to check out me and Chris tomorrow night. Me and Joe on Fantasy and Frames tomorrow. We hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy. Because I think most people are off Monday, I hope, for the holiday. They should be.
Yes, I mean, I am.
If so, I am too. So I hope, you just basically, because it's going to be cold as hell in Georgia, let's watch football from 4 o'clock Saturday, through Monday morning. So I'm very excited about that. But Joe Matz, Keith Flemming, guys, appreciate the support. We will be here again. We're going to be with you all the way through Super Bowl. Can't get rid of us. But we appreciate all your support. Appreciate Fantasy Six Pack for letting us do this. And we'll see you guys soon. Peace. I got to get us a radio. We're going to get a song because I got